Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Story. Today, we're bringing you an exciting new tale that's perfect for improving your English. Listen carefully to understand the story, learn new vocabulary, and boost your English listening skills. So, get ready for an amazing story, and let's start learning English together. My eyes shimmered with a fleeting light, and my heart beat with an unknown rhythm. Today, my bridal palanquin was lifted, and I was leaving my home, departing from my parents' embrace, to embark on a new journey. Every girl dreams of this day, a day when she steps out of her old courtyard to make a new one her own. My steps were hesitant, but my heart held 1,000 aspirations. As the car pulled up to the threshold of my in-laws' home, for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Before me stood a grand wooden door, behind which my new life was set to begin. The women of the house welcomed me warmly. Following the path of customs and traditions, I stepped inside. Every face, though unfamiliar, looked at me with a sense of belonging, except one. That was my brother-in-law, who seemed to be around my age, or perhaps a year or two younger, standing slightly apart from the crowd, looking at me with a strange smile. That smile instilled a slight uneasiness in my heart, a feeling I couldn't quite comprehend at that moment. The initial days after the wedding passed like a hazy dream. Between the rituals, the comings and goings of guests, and the effort to understand new relationships, time flew by. My new home, which I'd only seen in pictures, was now becoming my own sanctuary. My in-laws were wonderful, and my husband, William, was also very caring and loving. Our chemistry was quickly building, and I felt I would soon settle into this new environment. The atmosphere in the house was pleasant and lively. In such a setting, my brother-in-law, John, was certainly present, but I didn't give him much thought. He was the youngest in the house and a university student, often with his friends or engrossed in his studies. Yet, occasionally, when he passed by, his gaze would linger on my face for a moment, a look I hadn't quite experienced before. It wasn't an overtly intrusive stare, but rather a fleeting glance that startled me for an instant, and I often dismissed it as just my imagination. As the days turned into weeks, my presence in the house became routine, and along with it, John's unusual glances grew more distinct. They were no longer just fleeting looks. Sometimes, when I was alone in the kitchen or hanging clothes on the rooftop, he would suddenly appear. Initially, his demeanor was merely casual, like, "Bobby, could you make some tea?" Or, "I can't find that book." But there was a peculiar glint in his eyes that made me uneasy. His tone began to feel excessively friendly, and occasionally, he would unnecessarily stand too close to me. An unfamiliar fear started to creep into my heart, a disquiet I couldn't share with anyone. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking, or perhaps it was just the effect of the new environment. I reasoned that he was still young, perhaps unaware of the subtleties of relationships, yet there was a hidden aggression in his behavior that shook me to my core. Days passed, and John's behavior was no longer limited to mere inappropriate glances. He was growing bolder, more audacious. One day, when no one else was home and I was alone in my room, John suddenly walked in. Before I could even ask, he claimed he needed something. I gestured for him to leave, but he closed the door and stood close to me. There was a terrifying glint in his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. Without any shame, he placed his hand on mine and, with a suppressed smile, said, "Bobby, you are so beautiful. Brother is truly lucky." His touch, his tone, and that gleam in his eyes all gave me a severe jolt. I immediately recoiled. A cold wave washed over me, but at that moment, I couldn't comprehend how to react. All I knew was that this boy, who once seemed like an innocent brother-in-law, was now taking on a dangerous form, and I began to fear his intentions. After that incident, my inner world felt completely shattered. John's words and that touch echoed in my mind repeatedly, chilling me to the bone. When I stepped out of the room, everything seemed different. Every glance felt like a questioning gaze. Everything in the house was normal. People were laughing, talking, but a heavy burden had settled on my heart. I couldn't tell anyone. A strange mix of shame and fear was eating away at me from within. What if I told William? Would he believe me? Would he go against his own brother? What if my new marriage got ruined? These questions pricked at my mind like thorns, making me feel utterly helpless. Sleep eluded me at night, and dark circles appeared under my eyes. I tried to keep myself busy with household chores and with William to escape these thoughts. But John's presence, his hidden smile, and his piercing stares constantly reminded me that this was just the beginning. My silence became an open invitation for John. He had likely realized that I wouldn't take any action against him, and this only emboldened him. One day, as I was talking to my sister on the phone, telling her about an old friend's wedding, John suddenly appeared behind me. I hadn't even noticed when he came. I quickly hung up the phone, but there was a strange smile on his face. "What's this, Bobby? So much talk about old friends. What will brother think if he finds out?" he said, his tone playful, but his words bitter as poison. It filled me with dread to realize he had overheard my conversation. He then leaned closer and whispered, "If you don't want these things to come out, you'll have to agree to a small request of mine." This was the first clear sign of blackmail for me. A shiver ran through my body, and I understood that now I not only had to contend with his inappropriate stares, but also with his sinister intentions. John's words continuously hammered in my mind. His threat was just the beginning. Over the next few days, his behavior grew even more aggressive. He'd try to corner me alone on small pretexts, then present his conditions. Sometimes he'd demand personal photos from my phone. Other times he'd tell me to meet him alone on the rooftop or in the garden. And sometimes his demands were even more vile, things I couldn't even fathom. Each of his requests was a new ordeal for me. I constantly lived in fear that if I didn't comply, he would tell William or someone else in the family about my conversation, which, though seemingly innocent, could unleash a storm with his twisted interpretation. My life had turned into a prison, with John as my captor. I was constantly vigilant, startled by every sound, fearing his sudden appearance. The color had drained from my joys, and I was slowly withering away inside, wondering how to escape this torment. My world was shrinking, and I was falling into a dark well from which there seemed to be no escape. William, who usually sensed my every worry, now perhaps mistook the sadness on my face for mere tiredness. I tried several times to hint at the truth, but the words would catch in my throat. I was terrified of how revealing the truth would affect our new relationship and whether he would even believe me. I thought about confiding in my sister-in-law, who had become a good friend, hoping she might understand. But then the fear of the news spreading and ruining my new home overwhelmed me. I was suffocating internally, lamenting my fate that this person, John, had entered my life like a monster. My laughter, my smile, everything had fallen victim to John's blackmail, and I had become a living corpse, waiting for a miracle. My silence and helplessness were proving to be an open field for John. He had completely ensnared me in his clutches. His demands were no longer limited to trivial matters. He began to exploit my husband's absence, attempting inappropriate advances. When no one was home, he would corner me in a separate room, grab my hand, or stand too close, making me deeply uncomfortable. I saw a demonic glint in his eyes that shook me to my core. Every day, my very existence was further dishonored by his actions. I started to dread even sleeping, fearing that this torment would haunt me in my dreams. I tried to confine myself to my room, but John would find some excuse to knock on the door, forcing me to come out. One morning, he even mixed something into my coffee, which made me extremely drowsy, and he took advantage of it to try and touch me. I screamed, but he quickly silenced me. This moment was unbearable for me. I realized that the situation had gone too far, and I had to do something. Otherwise, this person would completely destroy my life. The moment John dared to mix something into my coffee and then try to touch me, the fear within me was replaced by anger and rebellion. I could no longer be a victim of his blackmail. This aspect of my life, which I couldn't share with anyone, was hollowing me out from the inside. I decided that I could no longer remain silent, no matter what. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I talk to William? Should I tell my mother-in-law? Or should I seek help from the police? All these thoughts were like a storm engulfing me. That day, I locked myself in my room and cried for a long time. But in those tears, there was no longer helplessness, but a new resolve. I gathered all my inner courage and thought that I had to pull myself out of this quicksand. I was no longer afraid of what would happen, but determined that no matter what, I had to make John accountable for his deeds. Sleep evaded my eyes all night, with only one thought dominating my mind: how to expose John. Who could I trust? Who should I tell? The next day, after William left for the office in the morning, I gathered all my courage. My sister-in-law, who had become a good friend, was getting ready for college. I stopped her and called her into my room. My face was pale, and my eyes were swollen, which immediately worried her. At first, I couldn't find the words, but then I mustered the courage and began to tell her everything. I recounted every single incident in detail, from John's inappropriate gazes to his blackmail, and then his increasingly bold attempts, right up to his trying to drug me. My sister-in-law listened in shock, her face displaying a mix of disbelief and anger. When I finished, she hugged me tightly and told me I had been very brave. "We will show him his place, Bobby," she said with a determined voice. "This secret will no longer stay hidden." Her words brought me some relief, as if a burden of years had been lifted, but the path ahead was still very difficult. My sister-in-law not only comforted me, but also became a strong pillar of support. She immediately said that we must now tell her mother, which meant my mother-in-law. I hesitated, fearful of how she would react, afraid she might believe John, or even worse, blame me. But my sister-in-law encouraged me. Mother isn't like that. She would never allow injustice to happen to anyone. Her words brought some ease to my heart. We decided that as soon as William returned from the office, we would all sit down together and tell Mother and William everything. It was a difficult decision, but there was no turning back now. In the evening, when everyone was home, my heart was pounding, feeling as though a century had passed. After dinner, we called Mother and William to sit with us and told them we needed to discuss something very important. My face was pale, and my sister-in-law's expression was also serious. They immediately sensed that something significant was wrong. My sister-in-law and I sat silently before Mother and William. A strange tension filled the room. Mother looked at me and gently asked, "What is it, Beta? Why do you look so troubled?" The words wouldn't come out of my mouth. My sister-in-law held my hand, then began to speak herself, recounting everything in detail from beginning to end. She laid bare every incident, from John's inappropriate gazes to his inappropriate touches, his blackmail, and then his attempt to drug me. As she spoke, William's face turned red with anger, and Mother's expression was a mix of shock and disbelief. When my sister-in-law finished, a complete silence fell over the room. William stood up, took a deep breath, and said, "What are you saying? John cannot do such a thing." He spoke with deep sorrow. Tears welled up in Mother's eyes. She held my hand and asked, "Beta, how long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell us earlier?" I burst into tears and could only manage to say, "I was scared." At that moment, a sound came from John's room, and everyone's gaze shifted towards it. John, who was likely near the door, eavesdropping on the conversation, now stepped forward. His face initially showed a flicker of distress, but in the very next moment, he composed himself and put on an innocent facade. "What happened, Mother? What are Bobby and Baji talking about?" he asked, his voice laced with deceit. William quickly stood up and advanced towards him, seething with anger. "You know what happened. What have you done to our new bride?" William roared, his voice thick with both pain and fury. John immediately sprang to his own defense. "What are you talking about, brother? I haven't done anything to Bobby. This is all a lie. They are both trying to frame me." He looked at me, his eyes holding a sinister warning, not in plea. Mother's face contorted in deep anguish. She didn't want conflict between her sons, but my sister-in-law immediately interjected. "Mother, by John, I am telling the truth. He has harassed Bobby a lot." A tense silence fell over the room, where everyone was searching for the truth on each other's faces. William looked at John, his eyes filled with profound anguish. "John, I am your elder brother, and I have always supported you. But this is a very serious accusation. If this is true, then there will be no place for you in this house." John's face momentarily registered fear upon hearing William's words, but then he defiantly denied everything. "Brother, I swear this is a lie. Bobby and Baji, I don't know why they are trying to frame me." He looked at Mother. "Mother, You know I can't do such a thing." My sister-in-law immediately interjected. "You're lying. What did you mix into Bobby's coffee that day when she was unwell? Why did you follow her to the rooftop?" John's face drained of color. He began to stammer. He had no answer. Mother saw this, and her heart sank. William grabbed John's arm, shaking him slightly, and demanded, "Speak, John. Is my wife lying? Is my sister lying?" John lowered his head. His silence was proof of his guilt. John's silence sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the room. Mother's face reflected deep sorrow over her son's actions. William, whose anger had now turned to grief, took a deep breath and looked at John. "Today you have stained our family's honor, John," William said slowly, his voice laced with pain. "The girl we brought into our home as a daughter-in-law, you harassed her." Mother stood up and took John's hand, tears in her eyes. "Son, what happened to you? How could you do this?" John still remained silent, head bowed. He had no justification. At that moment, it was decided that John would be sent to live with his maternal uncle in another city for some time. This decision wasn't merely to punish him, but also to give him an opportunity to repent for his actions and ensure he would never do such a thing again. A huge burden lifted from my heart. I felt a sense of release, but it was also coupled with a bitter memory that would perhaps always remain with me. My story is a lesson for many girls that when difficult times arise in life, you must never lose hope. The presence of people like John is a bitter reality in society. Individuals who try to exploit others' weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But despite all of this, I did not let my honor be tarnished. I held on to the truth and listened to my inner voice, which urged me not to remain silent. This path was not easy. Fear and shame kept me awake for many nights. But when I decided to bring the truth before my family with my sister-in-law's help, I realized that the strength was within me all along. My family, especially my husband William and my mother-in-law, supported me in a way that is commendable. They did not doubt me for a moment. Instead, they acknowledged their own son's mistake and brought me justice. John's departure from home was not just his punishment, but my deliverance, and proof that if you walk the path of truth, you are not left alone. I learned a great deal from this difficult experience. I realized that honor lies not in succumbing to fear, but in standing up for your rights. A girl's honor is her greatest treasure, and it must never be allowed to be trampled upon by anyone at any cost. If you find yourself trapped in a situation where you are being blackmailed or harassed, do not remain silent. Tell someone, whether it's your parents, siblings, husband, a close friend, or a trustworthy teacher. Truth and courage can pull you out of that quicksand. Today, I live a content and peaceful life. That bad time was like a terrifying dream that passed. I have built a strong relationship with my husband and feel completely safe in my home. This story is for every girl who is in a difficult situation. Never give up. Raise your voice, because your honor is most precious, and it is your right to protect it. Thank you for listening to the Story on English Story. We hope you found this thrilling tale helpful for your English learning journey. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories, and leave a comment telling us what you thought. Keep practicing your English, and we'll see you in the next episode.